You're listening to Civic Media. You can tune into any of our live shows on any radio station across the state with the Civic Media app. Find us in your phone's app store and listen anytime, anywhere.
Live across Wisconsin on Civic Media, you're listening to Mornings with Pat Kreitlow, powered by Up North News. Now, from our Lake Wissota studio, here is the founding editor of Up North News, Pat Kreitlow.
And good morning. It is 7:06. Nice to have you here up north on this Thursday morning, August 14th, 2025. Parker Olson is our producer down in Madison Studio A2. Brittany Merlot is off today. Stick around, though. Keep it on your local Civic Media station for your local forecast because it's nice now, but it's the weekend is looking a little dicey here. Rob says from Tigerton, looks like central Wisconsin could be in the bullseye for heavy rains this weekend. Yeah, one of the forecast models I saw basically had a front parking itself somewhere over Wisconsin with all-day rains Saturday and Sunday. So consider yourself on notice to keep an eye on that local forecast. From Tigerton, Rob says, good morning. Fog and mist and 60 degrees. Yesterday I had 4 yards to mow in Tigerton and then some work around the home. He, too, like Roger, is noting the sunrise and sunset, 6 a.m. This is the last sunrise before 6 a.m., and we're coming up, or no, almost the last sunrise before 6 a.m. We are now at the last sunsets after 8 p.m., as those days start getting a little bit shorter and shorter. So keep an eye on the weather and enjoy the days because they are not nearly as long as they used to be already. Coming up later this hour, we will be talking to Mike Van Someren, a candidate for state senate in the Milwaukee suburbs. It's a district that is heavily Republican, heavily went for Donald Trump last year. And yet that just doesn't mean what it used to mean. As you'll probably hear me say a few different times, when I was elected to the legislature back in 2006, that was a midterm for George W. Bush's second term. And there were a lot of angry folks about the way the Bush administration was handling things. And it was a Democratic sweep. I mean, winning some assembly seats that hadn't flipped in decades, in nearly 100 years in one or two instances. And next year is kind of shaping up that way at the rate the Trump folks are doing things right now, as more people realize this guy's not doing anything that he said he was going to do, and in fact is hurting them. So Mike Van Someren is getting in the race for this particular state senate district, and we will visit with him in just a little while. In our 8 o'clock hour, we'll talk to Chad Holmes from our Civic Media station in Wausau. We'll talk to Sean O'Malley about your money and the markets, and we'll talk to Joe Zepecki, including a very interesting idea from one of the Republican candidates for governor, Bill Berrien. Basically, everybody should be packing a gun. Heck of a position to take in an era where we're concerned more than ever about mass shootings and school shootings and things like that. But we'll get into that. There is also, of course, the Up North News newsletters that you can get on the weekdays. And, of course, we've got a special Sunday morning edition as well that's all about Wisconsin politics. It also contains our question of the week. And this week, I ask, should politicians delete their social media accounts, their personal social media accounts, while they are in office? Either, yes, they should delete them, or no, they should not, because it is essentially a window into who they are as a person. And even if they're, not a good person, at least you learn it from their personal social media. Patricia here, who goes by the email handle Golf Granny, says, I could not decide between the two answers. It is good to see the true person who's tweeting, but that person also needs to be doing the job that they were elected to do. Here's one from an email handle Graham Cracker, who says, option B, delete the account. How can a grown man with relative importance be such a sleaze? That, of course, was the discussion of Derek Van Orden and the disgusting things that he keeps tweeting. Brent, with the email handle Skate a Bit, says, I would let him keep tweeting. It's how we know what kind of a person he really is. A small percentage of our population may agree with his values, but the majority of us do not. We need to make more people aware of who he really is. And that, of course, matches up nicely with my view that he has been skating on the publicity, the free publicity that he gets from local media. In fact, in last Sunday morning's newsletter, I make special note of how local media in the 3rd Congressional District loves to cover him when he goes on farm trips, like this one, and this one, and this one, and this one, and this one. And each one of those in the newsletter is a separate link to a different story, a warm and fuzzy Derek Van Orden story. He's there with the calves. Aren't the calves cute? Aren't the cows adorable? And he talks about standing up for the American farmer and blah, 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 because he's got nothing to actually show for it, but he never gets asked about it. He does not get asked about, his embarrassing social media accounts riddled with insults. And the one or two times that he has been asked, then you see the real him. He just unloads on the reporter and says, oh, the reporter must be biased and the reporter is just a terrible person. To which I would say to the reporters, do not be intimidated by that. Keep asking those questions. Keep asking about the guy who said he was not going to cut Medicaid, that nobody who has earned the benefits will have their benefits cut, which is a lie, which is demonstrably false. Bring that up to him. Make him answer for that. Ask him why millionaires and billionaires should get their taxes cut disproportionately more than the middle-class people in his own district. Stop just doing the farm tours and at least pay more attention to the tweets, especially the ones off his personal account. So again, that's part of our question of the week. You can get that by signing up for our newsletter, upnorthnewswi.com. The Brewers were winners yesterday, and if we don't see Todd Alba later on, Parker, I believe he is already in line at a George Webb someplace waiting on that burger. The details haven't been announced yet, but I know Todd loves himself some free hamburgers.
Who doesn't love a free hamburger? Come on.
So he will, he, like many others today, will be waiting to hear the details because, in case you've been living under a sports rock, the Brewers won their 12th game in a row yesterday, beating the Pittsburgh Pirates 12-5. That's double digits in score for the second straight game. The fourth time this month. I again remind you, the Brewers are undefeated in the month of August. We are almost halfway through the month. They had 12 hits yesterday. 10 of them were singles. They play that small ball game as well as anybody these days. And even when you know it's coming, they still execute it to perfection. So the George Webb hamburger chain in Southeast Wisconsin is going to put out details later today on how they're going to go about giving thousands upon thousands upon thousands of burgers out there.
Oh, I read earlier today, I don't remember where it is, but they literally ordered thousands of pounds of hamburgers.
Yeah, if you're one of those beef suppliers somewhere out there, you're just like, oh, go Brewers, because you just got a big order. Adam putting a comment in YouTube, which is nothing but hamburger emojis, just all the way across the street, which is great. Brewers are off today. They are on their way to Cincinnati to play the Reds. That will get going tomorrow. Pre-game begins at 5:05 tomorrow evening on several Civic Media stations. And as we mentioned, this is going to be quite the road trip. 3 in Cincinnati and then 5 games at Wrigley Field next week against the Cubs. And again, today is the last off day for the Brewers before they have a stretch of 18 days where they're going to play 19 games. So this is all good. Enjoy the moment. And I'm not trying to be a buzzkill. I'm just saying this next phase is going to be a character builder, shall we say.
As long as they make it through this stretch without picking up a couple of injuries, then I don't particularly care how they play during this stretch. That's kind of where I'm at. And also, go ahead.
I was going to say, they're looking pretty good for making the postseason at this point. They and the Cubs are still jockeying back and forth. Right now, the Brewers are up, 7 or 7.5 in the National League Central?
7.5.
But, but there's the Cubs aren't stinking up the joint, is what I'm trying to say here.
No, the Cubs had a little bit of misfortune, and I do want to say last night, really, really sad scene up in Toronto with the Cubs. They had a player who had it was his first game back from the 60-day IL, and I think he hyperextended his knee running out to first base. So really a little bit of misfortune there for the Cubs. Feel bad about that.
Tony says, "You mean the lowly Cubs?"
Yeah.
Perhaps, but again, let's not tempt the baseball gods, shall we? But of course, the Brewers are hot. It's the hottest ticket in town, which is why tomorrow you should really try to get free tickets. 4 free tickets that we'll be giving out as part of Free Ticket Friday. You get the Civic Media app. Listen for the keywords throughout the day, text them in through the app, and be in a statewide drawing for Brewers tickets to a game next week. We will tell you which game, and we will tell you the keyword tomorrow. So be paying attention there. And Mike Clemens, who is joining us tomorrow, he always joins us Friday mornings at 8:30. He wants you to know that he's in Indianapolis right now covering the Packers. The Packers have a joint practice with the Indianapolis Colts this afternoon, and then a preseason game Saturday at noon at Lucas Oil Field. So that's where Mike Clemens has been reporting from, which, again, I know I heard one of the sound bites earlier that the thing they like about the preseason games is that it's not, just soft contact drills. There's actually like a little bit more unpredictability so that you get a feel for real game conditions. Mm-hmm. But to what you said about that Cubs player earlier, the potential for injuries increases as well. And I'm sure that terrifies or depresses every NFL coach that's out there when they do this.
Oh, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Jordan Love even. How lucky are we that he only had a little, tiny surgery is in the grand scheme of things on his
just
left thumb.
A little tiny surgery.
Just little stitches is all.
Yeah. Let's see. From the Cap Times newspaper in Madison, the Cap Times Idea Fest lineup has been announced, and it includes Governor Tony Evers will be part of it, Illinois Governor J.B. Pritzker, Minnesota Governor Tim Walz. There's Stacey Abrams from Georgia, journalist Jennifer Rubin, columnist Maureen Dowd from the New York Times, Washington Post columnist Eugene Robinson, and more. It's kind of the Cap Times calls it their big September Thought Festival, and it will now run, they've announced, from Monday, September 8th through Saturday, September 13th. And so you can head over to captimes.com to learn more. I like the idea of an idea fest, of, really talking about best practices, what works, what doesn't work, which takes us to Bill Berrien. And we'll talk more about this in our next hour with Joe Sapecki. But from Molly Beck in the Milwaukee Journal-Sentinel, Whitefish Bay manufacturing CEO and candidate for governor Bill Berrien says he supports eliminating state permit requirements for firearm owners who want to carry guns in concealed fashion. Berrien says, "I believe that every American is granted a carry permit and that it's in the form of the Second Amendment. We need to get back to personal responsibility and freedom." And again, he gives us the bunk that the best way to stop a bad guy with a gun is a good guy with a gun. Bill Berrien, we recently had another shooting on a military base loaded with guns, and it didn't stop somebody there. You think more guns in school are going to be the answer? Go ahead and put that out there, buddy. We'll talk more about that with Joe Sapecki. We'll have more headlines coming up. And then Mike Van Someren, a candidate for state senate. A local update is next for some of you. Live from the heart of America's up north from Lake Wissota, I'm Pat Kreitlow. This is the Civic Media Radio Network.
You're listening to Civic Media. Stay up to date on the latest news and information for your local community and Wisconsin by signing up for our free email newsletter. Visit civicmedia.us/email to get started.
Hey, Guess what? Up North News is now on social media on Blue Sky. Go over to Blue Sky and search for Up North News WI. You can say that with pretty much all of the social media accounts out there. Just search for Up North News WI, and you're likely to find us on Facebook, Instagram, TikTok, YouTube, and yeah, still Twitter. Dumpster fire though it may be, we are there. So if you are still doing your doom scrolling there, we totally understand. Let's see, from Alicia, when talking about a shooting on a military base, please understand that military bases are not loaded with guns. Very few people on base are authorized to carry a firearm on base. All personal firearms are required to be in the armory. I completely understand that, Alicia. My point still remains. Those are also the closest places to go get a gun. And if mass shootings can happen there, they can happen anywhere. Well, this whole bunk about, well, we just need more guards. We need more police officers in school. Look at that shooting in Manhattan. Was it last week or the week before? Who was the first one killed? The security guard, the off-duty cop who was there. That's not something you can stop. I don't know if folks understand this. Bullets, they're really fast. And if the shooter is coming up on a situation and nobody is expecting a shooter to come up on a situation, they're going to get the first shots fired off. So if they've got a magazine that is monstrously big, or they're carrying multiple weapons, because in this country, God knows you can get multiple weapons faster than you can drop a hat, well, then we're going to continue to have a problem until we do something about, catch me carefully here, the guns. It's still the guns. Don't tell me it's mental health, and then don't do anything about, mental health programs, for example. Don't tell me it's about having more police while you're then running these austerity budgets that force local governments to make terrible decisions about hiring more officers and getting them more weapons of war versus providing the basic services that would keep people from, say, snapping and becoming mass shooters. It's still the guns. And I don't know that we're going to handle this in my lifetime, but that doesn't make it any less true that is exactly what we should still be working toward. End of rant. Because we've got to make a pivot, a hard pivot here, Parker. This is the Taylor Swift portion of the program.
My God, that was, wow, okay. That's a pivot.
It is, because I can't.
Well, time for T-Swizzle, huh?
What's that?
Time for T-Swizzle. Huh?
Time for T-Swizzle. She showed up on her boyfriend's podcast, which is called The New Heights. It's Travis and Jason Kelsey. And so she appeared on there with Travis and with Jason to talk about her new album. And she knows, we talked about this yesterday, how to build up hype for the album. So the Associated Press, which is, of course, a very, very stoic, a very long, proud institution of journalism.
They're the standard.
Yeah, they're the standard. And one of their big stories is, here's every major update from Taylor Swift's first appearance on the Kelsey's New Heights podcast. So here's everything they say you need to know. So who am I not to pass it along to you? So Swift announced the new album is called Life of a Showgirl. And so she showed off the album cover in there. If you're wondering, how does she get this done? She talked about it. She said basically when she was on the European leg of the Eras tour, she would, between dates, fly back to a place in Sweden with producers Max Martin and Shellback, and they would work on the album. The entire album was completed in between dates of her European tour. Is it going to be a bunch of, slow, tortured music? No, because she's got this boyfriend, Travis Kelsey, who appears to be a pretty cool guy. Okay. Near as I can tell, wouldn't you say?
I think so. He's okay at his job. Yeah.
So what will this album be? She says, bangers. She says they're not going to be like the Tortured Poets department. And she also says there's not going to be a surprise double album. She says this is going to be a lot more upbeat because she says life is more upbeat. In other words, she's got somebody that makes her happy.
Good for her.
So that's great. She says the album's goal is infectious melodies and vivid lyrics. The album cover has her in the bathtub because she says that's how I end every day. She also shared a little bit of personal information about her parents. Her dad recently had quintuple bypass surgery. Her mom got a new knee. So she describes this as, "This is the summer of my parental upgrade," which is pretty good. I mean, who couldn't use bionic parents, And she also, I like this line. She said she has spent a lot of time in Florida with Travis Kelce and says, "Our jobs are actually very similar. Our jobs are to entertain people for 3 hours in NFL stadiums." I think that's fair,
Yeah, that's fair.
Yeah. And then finally, she talked about her hobbies, which include baking, and her current obsession is making sourdough bread, especially variations like blueberry lemon, cinnamon swirl, and funfetti.
Oh, wow.
Funfetti.
How about that?
Tony on YouTube apparently a few minutes ago put, "You left out the entire conversation about sourdough bread," and they just puts up, "I spoke too soon." Nope, the sourdough. I mean, it's everything that you want to know about it because of her appearance, which, by the way, both Travis Kelce and brother Jason, and then what is Jason's wife's name? Casey, right? Casey
I believe
Kelce?
so. Yeah, that sounds right.
Is she funny? I love her. Now, again, I have never seen the New Heights podcast by the brothers, and I've never seen Not Gonna Lie, the podcast by Kelce, Ms. Kelce. But again, thanks to my doom scrolling on YouTube, I feel like I've seen all the good parts, and they're all good.
That's all. Yeah. That's what social media is for.
Remember how you said we couldn't have a meeting yesterday because of the Brewers game?
Yeah.
We had another teammate who couldn't because she was waiting for the podcast to download so she could watch all these folks. That's what kind of a productive day we had around here yesterday, folks, in case you're wondering.
I think we're putting out a bad message about our productivity here.
We will be much more productive with Senate candidate Mike Van Someren coming up next. You're up north. Kylie. Yes, Kylie. Thank you, Tony. So as I've mentioned before, we're on social media now, including Blue Sky, Up North News WI. And Up North News WI is where you find us in most places on social media. Somebody didn't get the instruction sheet for TikTok, so on TikTok it's simply Up North News, but every place else is Up North News WI. I say that because I believe people should be rewarded when they have consistency in their handles, which takes us to Mike Van Someren, our next guest, who's a candidate for Wisconsin's 33rd State Senate District, whose website is mikevansomeren.com, and I'll spell that for you in a bit. But at Facebook and Instagram and TikTok and Twitter and Blue Sky, you can find him at MVS for Mike Van Someren, MVSFOR for WI, MVS for WI. The man knows his social media. He's an excellent writer and hoping to be an excellent candidate in the 33rd State Senate District. Mike Van Someren, welcome to the program.
Thank you for having me.
It's good to have you here. And again, for folks that there is going to be a quiz. Mike Van Someren, it's a VAN, and of course, Someren is SOMEREN, SOMEREN, MikeVanSomeren.com. Mike, are you in Delafield?
I am in Delafield. Today I'm actually working in my office downtown Milwaukee, though.
Okay. And you are challenging Republican Senator Chris Kapenga in the 33rd Senate District. Let's talk about what that district is, where it is, and then we'll get into your candidacy. So
sure.
Where are people looking to maybe vote for you?
So it's all of Heartland, the western edge of Waukesha. It goes all the way up to Hartford in Washington County, and then Judson to Jefferson County just a little bit. All of the western, basically the western half of Waukesha County, and then into Washington County and just a little bit into Jefferson County.
Okay. So let's get the Mike Van Someren story. Tell us how you came to be. I'll start just by saying, how did a boy from Somerset, way out in western Wisconsin, end up where you are today?
Football, honestly.
Okay.
My my background is my dad's a truck driver. My mom was an office manager / secretary, and blue collar, working class roots. I was huge as a child, 6 feet tall in 4th grade. And so coaches found me and said, you need to play sports. I said, okay. Did well in football and had the opportunity to go play for Wisconsin. Coach Barry Alvarez, one of the great coaches and just a great all-around guy. Played for Brett Bielema as well. Backed up some amazing people. I never quite cracked the starting lineup at Wisconsin, but I was traveling as a walk-on. And from there, I went to Marquette University Law School and graduated, did very well in law school, and came out and started practicing law. And around the time COVID hit, I decided that things just weren't going right. And so I decided to throw my hat in the ring in 2022 in a run for Congress, which wasn't successful, but I learned a lot. And, one thing you learn in sports is you're not going to win every game. And so now I'm running again after going to a listening session or two of Chris Kapenga and not being overly impressed with the way that he approaches things and basically tells people, this is what I believe. And so I'm not going to hear you. I'm not going to help you. And that to me just isn't the job of a representative. It's very similar to the job of a lawyer. My job is not to tell somebody you can't do something. It's to tell them how we could possibly do something that might look different than they envisioned, but it's actually it will still accomplish the same things.
Well, let's talk about those things you want to accomplish then and lay out what your top priorities are if you should be elected to the state Senate.
Sure. My top priorities are raising wages, policies that we can implement to raise wages, because I'm a firm believer that it's not just altruistic or moral backing to say we want to raise people's wages. We want people to be more comfortable. It's also economic. Businesses do well when there are more people with more money because then they can buy the stuff. I mean, that's what built the middle class, was a secure working class of people that had enough money to spend. And I would like us to try and get back to that. I also want to try and cut down some of our expenses, particularly on the property tax front. Homeowners should be secure that when they buy a home, they'll be able to afford the taxes that pay for all the services. And every town shouldn't be an island. It should be part of a larger team, which is the state. And the state is part of a larger team, which is our country. That's, as a team sport athlete for many years of my life, I've always known that being a part of a team doesn't mean I have to score the touchdown, but it means I'm part of every touchdown that's scored, using a football metaphor, right? So we can do things to help alleviate those property tax concerns, things like reworking the shared revenue model or taking care of the dark store loophole and things like that will actually help alleviate some of the pressure on commercial, but also mostly residential people that own homes and are just trying to get by. I also want to fund our public education system, fully fund it. And, I'm not against private schools. So if private schools are going to get public money, well, then they're going to have all the same strings that the public schools have, because we need to have an apples to apples comparison. And then finally, I want transparency. I'm so tired of things being passed in the dead of night. I'm so tired of people not knowing what's going on and feeling like their elected representatives are almost vampirish, right? Because they don't do anything except in the dead of night, and then they go and hide in their offices during the day. We can't have that. And so I want to bring a level of transparency and accountability. And, if I get into office, that would be great. I plan to implement all of these things myself, and hopefully we can spark some sort of change.
We're talking to Mike Van Someren, a candidate for Wisconsin State Senate in the 33rd Senate District in the Milwaukee suburbs. And you put that all in an extremely positive way for folks that need the translation from the way that I put it. I liked that you mentioned that there should be teamwork, because when it comes to property taxes, we're living the classic example of not teamwork, where a legislature passes the buck, which is the opposite of teamwork, passes the buck to the local school districts and says, well, we're not going to fully fund you. You need to raise property taxes because, we want you to look like the bad guys. And it absolutely, you see that near revolt in homeowners about the way that their property tax bills are growing, because you've got a lazy legislature that won't hold up their end of the teamwork deal.
Yeah. I mean, we've been sitting on billions of dollars in excess funds, and we have a legislature that wants to do a tax cut, but those funds are a one-time. They were COVID funds. They are not funds that we're expecting to collect over and over and over again. And they want to put us in a structural deficit, something that we heard about a lot under Scott Walker, and how by putting us in a structural deficit, that gives them an excuse to cut more services. And again, a lot of people think that Democrats want to just give, and that's just simply not the case. There is a balance to be found, and there is some give and take. It's just like a team. I was an offensive lineman. I would have loved to score a touchdown, but that was never going to happen. But I was part of every touchdown run and then part of every touchdown pass, whether I ever crossed the end zone or not.
Mike Van Someren is our guest. He's a candidate for Wisconsin State Senate in a district that is, in traditional times, overwhelmingly Republican. According to Dan Schaefer here, President Trump took that district by 34 points. But I know, as I reminded folks earlier in the broadcast, that there are these years where pendulums swing. The year that I got elected to the state Senate, 2006, was a year unlike any other for Democrats. There was a lot of dissatisfaction out there with, the Bush administration, with the war in Iraq, with the way the economy was going. And to me, it seems 20 years later, those same indications are out there that, frankly, no Republican candidate, no Republican incumbent should feel any sense of complacency out there. It just feels like there's something out there in electorate, and I'm wondering what you're hearing in your part of the state.
Yeah, I would agree. I think, look, yes, I'm running as a Democrat. I'm not going to run from that, but I am running to represent all people, because as somebody who is now a lawyer, but most of my friends are working class guys, construction workers, things like that. I understand where they're coming from, and I understand the rhetoric coming out of both sides. And my rhetoric is going to be very simple. If you're working day in and day out, you should be able to raise your family. That full stop. You should be able to afford a home, whether that's a nicer apartment or being able to save up for a single family home, whatever you want to do. You should be able to do that if you're working full time. You should not have to work multiple jobs and still be treading water. And there are things that we can do to help fix that.
And let's get into that, especially when it comes to housing and affordability, because you have experience serving on boards, including Habitat for Humanity of Waukesha County and others. So talk about some of your other community involvement.
Yeah, so currently I'm not on any boards because of all the other things I've been doing, but I have served on a number of boards from my church's finance committee. So I headed up the finance committee at Wauwatosa Presbyterian. I also served on various boards, including Artworks for Milwaukee in the past, and Habitat for Humanity of Waukesha County. And, all of that, there's all these charities trying to do good work, and there's money out there, but, they're focused. A lot of these organizations are focusing on the lowest income people. And quite frankly, there are people in the middle that are struggling too. And that's where the state needs to step in, because the people that need help, that are just barely getting by, most of them are going to have to hit rock bottom before they're going to qualify for a lot of these charitable organizations. And so we need to make sure that we don't leave the middle behind.
And so when you see a legislature that has been, like you say, leaving billions on the table to write tax cuts that are skewed heavily toward, the upper brackets, what I'm hearing you say is it's not that there isn't room for tax relief out there, but that it should be a more balanced approach.
Yes. Well, and let's not forget something. In progressive taxation, people tend to think that if you cut the top, if you make income over, let's say, $300,000, and that puts you in the top tax bracket, that all of your income is going to be taxed at that top tax bracket. That's not the case. So when you cut taxes at the lower levels and you leave the higher level intact, that's still a tax cut for everybody, because people that are making that upper income tax bracket money, they're paying taxes all the way up the chain, right? So they get a tax break. They get the same tax break that the rest of us get until they earn more money. And then that tax break can either be larger because you made a big cut at the top, or it can be smaller because you either didn't cut or you made a smaller cut at the top.
So when you run next year, and you'll be running, as a Democrat in this state Senate district, there will also be an open race for governor, with Governor Evers not running for a third term. Certainly there'll be other spotlight races around the state, but the governor's race is going to get the lion's share of attention. So what will you be telling folks about your own particular race when there's also an open governor's seat, about, the importance of whether we're going to get a new governor regardless? What do you think would be best for your district and for your state with a new governor?
Somebody that wants to be part of a team. And right now, I don't see any of the Republican candidates that want to be part of a team. They want unitary control of the government. I think that Governor Evers has done a good job in many ways. He has done a good job of working with a Republican legislature and doing what he can to help more people than, quite frankly, what I'm seeing them trying to do. Now, at the same time, I'm not going to be somebody that's going to sit there and just rubber stamp anything a Democratic governor is going to do. And I don't know of any other Democratic candidates or incumbents that would do the same thing. That I can't say for the Republican Party. I've seen a lot more rubber stamping on their end, and I don't think that's good for government. I think that people elect the legislature to provide their own ideas and their own way of doing things, and that's how the sausage gets made.
Yeah, if only we could see that in plenty of places, including Congress as well, but certainly the legislature. Mike Van Someren is running in the state Senate. MikeVanSomeren.com and MVS4WI at Facebook, Instagram, TikTok, Blue Sky, and Twitter. Mike, great to meet you. Thank you so much. We appreciate the campaign update.
Great meeting you, and thank you very much.
Oh, you are very welcome. We will continue with a local update for some of you, and then a very busy second hour with Chad Holmes and Joe Zapecki and Sean O'Malley. I'm Pat Kreitlow. This is the Civic Media Radio Network.
You're listening to Civic Media. Find the latest news, information, and archives of all your favorite shows on the Civic Media website, civicmedia.us.
This is normally the part of the program where we would hear from Todd Alba from the conveniently named Todd Alba Show. Weekday afternoons, 2 to 4, across the Civic Media Radio Network. I like to joke that Todd's probably already standing in line someplace at a George Webb for his free hamburger. I think he actually has something like a dentist appointment or something like that. But, when the reality is boring, you go with the feature, right? And, the feature would be, how great would it be if you could report from a George Webb right now?
You know what? That would be a great report. I think we should do that.
I would. And in the spirit of Les Nessman from WKRP, I'd like to have him calling it, as the helicopter flies overhead and rains burgers down upon the population, or some other theater of the mind that we could do with this.
That would be fantastic.
We could have a lot of fun with a hamburger drop from a helicopter.
Get them little parachutes.
There's so many people that have never seen WKRP in Cincinnati, but they have seen that. They have seen the turkey drop, Parker pointing to himself as well. And one of the best parts, of course, is as the helicopter's coming in and Les is, and you don't see Les, you just see the rest of the gang in the radio booth. And he says, and the helicopter is pulling a banner. It says WKR.
Oh,
like he doesn't, and the whole station crew is just like exasperated, and then of course the turkey comes raining down. But
one of my favorite parts of that clip is, I assume it's later on in the episode, is that
when they come back in at the end,
he comes back in, he's covered in feathers,
and Arthur Carlson, the station manager, gives that immortal line, "As God is my witness, I thought turkeys could fly." And yeah, maybe not when you drop them from a helicopter. So we're just giving you the idea, George Webb, that if you want to fly over with a helicopter and drop a few hamburgers, they don't make as big a splash as, say, dropping a turkey.
It won't be as much of a bombing.
No. It won't be as much of a bomb. Exactly. Thank you very much. In looking at what happened over last weekend, the flash flooding in Milwaukee, I was drawn to an article from Milwaukee Magazine from earlier this year, back in February, in fact. And in talking about this article, I do not in any way want to say that any of the flash flooding that occurred is the fault of any of the victims. That's not what the point about this is at all. But it is about urban planning and what cities did over generations when it came to their rivers and their creeks and their streams and things like that. And I think I may have mentioned before that, again, going back more than 30 years, when my wife was attending medical school in Milwaukee, I was working for the radio station up in West Bend, then known as WBKV. And it was this relatively new radical concept that I was covering, and that was basically looking at the Milwaukee River again, because it was such an afterthought for decades. Even if it wasn't being used as a dumping ground anymore, it just wasn't as prevalent. It wasn't integrated into, the cities and the communities that were along the way. And this was happening in other rivers as well. And look, the work is far from over. But if you go to downtown Milwaukee now, compared to back then, you see that the rivers there, the Milwaukee, the Kinnickinnic, the Root, they are coming to life much more than they were back when they were turned into concrete channels or even put underground. And it turns out that was the case with State Fair Park in West Allis, something that I didn't know until the flooding this weekend. And in fact, I believe it was Sam Kuffel's social media post that got a lot of attention. One of those old-timey maps of State Fair Park way back in the day with a creek running through it, Honey Creek. And according to this Milwaukee Magazine article from 6 months ago, it rises up in suburban Greenfield. Now it goes through a concrete channel to the north, then plunges underground for 2 miles, including the entire length of State Fair Park in West Allis, then reemerges along a wooded parkway to meet the Menominee River somewhere near downtown Wauwatosa. And while it is buried today, the magazine notes, that segment was once a prized amenity of State Fair Park. And just imagine this lovely little creek that was running through. However, because Honey Creek would jump its banks every so often with too much rain or too much snow, in the Depression, federally funded relief workers, this was one of their jobs programs, was to deepen and flood-proof Honey Creek. But as we've learned since that time, the work that you do that is said to be flood-proofing where you are only makes the flooding problem worse, because now you've created this channel that only speeds up the water as it gets further down. So unless you're prepared to turn every river and creek into a concrete channel, you're just creating a problem somewhere else. And so in the early 1960s, it went from being a concrete line channel to simply being routed underground, and so that there could be more development at State Fair Park. Well, what we've certainly learned since then is that you can bury a river or a creek, but the geography is still what it is. You're still in that lower lying area. And when it floods too much to run through an underground channel, it's still going to go where it's going to go, but above ground. And that's what we're seeing at State Fair Park. Now, what has happened since then, as I've noted, is that more of these rivers, streams, creeks are being brought back to more of a natural state. And instead of trying to live right on top of it, that you actually provide a buffer zone. I recall working in the legislature to buy properties that were in floodplains so that we wouldn't have to keep paying to rebuild when there was flood damage. Now, I'm not saying we're going to move State Fair Park, but I wouldn't be surprised if somewhere down the line, Honey Creek doesn't once again flow through State Fair Park, and you simply mitigate the occasional flooding that's going to happen now and then and bring State Fair Park back to nature. Coming up in our next hour, we'll talk to Chad Holmes from our civic media station in Wausau. We'll talk to Joe Zepecki. We'll talk to Sean O'Malley about your money and the markets. That's all coming up after the 8 o'clock news. First, a reminder, you can sign up for our newsletters over at upnorthnewswi.com. Click subscribe in the top banner. I'm Pat Kreitlow on the Civic Media Radio Network.
The national news cycle never stops, but it can be hard to find news about your local community. Civic Media is dedicated to providing quality local and state news coverage across Wisconsin. With the Civic Media app, you can get notifications about local stories that matter to you and your community. Find the free Civic Media app in your phone's app store and choose notifications from the menu to tell us what kind of news you want to hear about.